Well, it is the end of the beginning, and the moment has most certainly been prepared for. Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. In today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at the 275th and final release as a part of the Doctor Who monthly main range that has of course been going since 1999, with the final story of the series being The End of the Beginning, as written by Robert Valentine, featuring Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann as the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th Doctors, alongside Mark Strickson as Vizsla Turlough, Charlie Pollard as portrayed by India Fisher, and of course Constance Clark as portrayed by Miranda Rayson. This release is available to order now on the Big Finish website. The physical CD is £14.99 and the download is £12.99. There's also additional details on the Big Finish website, as well as a trailer that can be listened to and a number of bundles available in order to save on multiple purchases and discounts. Here we go, the very end of the Doctor Who Big Finish monthly range, although it isn't really, because I have absolutely no doubt that in the future I will be doing videos about monthly range releases that have already been released as a part of Big Finish's mammoth back catalogue. However, for now, this is the final release as a part of the series, and I must admit, it is a rather sad moment to see this line come to an end, because for quite a long time, the Doctor Who Big Finish monthly range was indeed Doctor Who. It started out at the very beginning in 1999, and that was our new form of Doctor Who content whilst Doctor Who was off our TV screen. So from there it has gone on to be this massive adventure with the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th Doctors, and it has seen a lot of introductions of brand new faces, brand new companions and brand new monsters, although now we're moving into a new format. I can fully understand why Big Finish have decided that to bring this series to an end, because as a reviewer myself, I find that a lot of Big Finish fans are wanting to move into the box sets as opposed to the singular releases, and I can see the attractive nature of that. It's much easier to spend £20 to £25 on a 4-part box set as opposed to £15 on one singular release. So the whole concept of accessibility has become an ongoing issue with the Doctor Who monthly range, and is one of the main things that puts new listeners off this series and kind of generates the appeal for the box sets. I must admit, I myself have gone back to try and purchase the physical CDs for the 6th Doctor era, because I eventually want to own all of the 6th Doctor stories physically, and I find it quite difficult to in fact track down the episodes that are not 6th Doctor stories, however ones I still need to listen to in order to fully appreciate various plot arcs and elements of certain stories. As we see this move into the box sets within the later half of this year, it is most certainly going to become the new form of accessibility for the classic series Doctors. I would dare say as well, arguably cheaper to experience more content within the box set format as opposed to singular 2-hour releases. I've noticed that Big Finish have started to collate bundles of the monthly range series, make it easier to kind of purchase the monthly range early stories in bulk, which might be a way forward for the future. I'm still sad to see this series come to an end, because it's very traditional. It's something that comes out every single month, and we have got so used to the monthly range being there, a constant in these rather unusual and different times. However, all good things must come to an end. So before we get into the actual episode itself, let's take a look at the production credits on the Big Finish website. So the producers for this release are Emily Cook and David Richardson. The remote sound engineer is Jack Townley. The cover artist is Ryan Appling. He's done an incredible job with this release, a really beautiful piece of artwork to end out this series. The director is Ken Bentley. The music and sound design is from Wilfred Acosta. The script editor is John Dorney, with the episode itself being written by Robert Valentine, and the executive producers being Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haig-Ellery. So the formatting for this episode overall is a little bit different to usual. So the runtime, as always, is around 2 hours long, and it has been split into the 4 parts of around 25 to 30 minutes, very much like classic series TV Doctor Who. However, the brilliant thing about this story is that each part is dedicated to a certain classic series Doctor, using their run title sequence from that era. So it is very much like a mini episode of 80s Doctor Who, with the different incarnations of the Doctor being around half an hour long each. So if you are somebody who's wanting to experience the classic series Doctors, having not really listened to many before, this is a perfect opportunity in almost a whistle-stop tour of the different eras, showcasing these Doctors' strengths, and it works very, very well. But also at the same time, each episode is given its own title. So part 1 is Death and the Desert, and that episode features the 5th Doctor and Turlough. Part 2 is Flight of the Black Star, featuring the 6th Doctor and Constance Clark. Part 3 is Night Gallery, featuring the 8th Doctor and Charlie Pollard. And then part 4 is The Lost Moon, and basically that episode is the multi-Doctor aspect of this narrative, where all of the loose threads get put together, all wraps together into one big coherent story, but the previous first 3 parts kind of still stand as their own individual stories in their own right. And that is where we're going to start off this review by crediting Robert Valentine, because I absolutely love the way that he's written this episode. I think that he gives all the classic series Doctors an equal presentation, and I really like that, because sometimes with multi-Doctor stories you get the impression that certain incarnations are upstaging others. You grow to appreciate them all, and something that I would like to note as well is that yes, Sylvester McCoy as the 7th Doctor is also in this story, however he is only in it within part 4 at the very end. I would dare say he's only in the episode for about 5 minutes. So if you are exclusively a 7th Doctor fan and you are only purchasing this episode for the 7th Doctor, then I would probably recommend reconsidering purchasing this story, because there really isn't that much 7 in the episode, and it works very well. And I think the interesting thing about the story is that it feels much bigger than it is. It feels like a box set as opposed to a 2-hour serial, because within the 4 parts you are visiting these different locations. You have the desert story in part 1, then you have the sci-fi futuristic gangscape within episode 2, then you return to London in the millennia, in fact just before the millennia in the 1990s. It's a really lovely parallel to that of Doctor Who the movie, of course the first 8th Doctor story, and then we go to the Lost Moon of Batoya for the final episode of this release, so again alien world setting. So this episode does a lot and introduces a lot of different characters from varied amounts of backgrounds, which is a really lovely way to bring this story forward, because it's interesting and constantly keeps you hooked. The general theme for this story, which basically is the same that applies for all of the parts, is that the Doctor is on a little bit of a quest without even knowing it, and I think it's not really a criticism to say that it does follow a rather basic quest formula, where in the first 3 parts we have the different incarnations tracking down a segment for this mechanism that basically aids a certain thing that the Doctor doesn't particularly realise what it is. So it's kind of a bit like the key to... well, it's exactly like the key to time, however a lot better and more consistent. From what I can remember, the key to time had a number of dud stories in the very middle. The thing with this episode is that the beginning of the end is in fact very, very consistent. It's consistently brilliant all the way throughout, with all the Doctors doing their own thing. Taking a look at the first story, we have the 5th Doctor and Turlough in the middle of the desert, and they basically set off the story as they are looking for a lost city, where this gem is in fact within the lost city. And it turns out that the gem is, you guessed it, of course the component to the mechanism that is aiding something that goes all the way back into the Doctor's past, because the Doctor had an academic tutor known as the Pilgrim, also known as Gostak, and basically he is somebody that the Doctor very much looked up to as a bit of inspiration, so we have a personal link within the story to kind of the early years of the Doctor's life, the Time Lord Academy, which is quite a nice little touch, and we get to see the Doctor pursuing basically his mission to find the Lost Moon of Batoya, because Gostak has not been seen for many, many years. He is presumed dead, and kind of the Doctor wants to pick up the pieces. So I love the way the episode actually builds up this desert setting. Again, it's very atmospheric. I love the sound design of the wind and the sand blowing everywhere. You do very much feel like you are in this environment with them. I think that both Peter Davison and Mark Strickson carry the story very well. I really like this relationship. I've complimented them recently in my review of The Blazing Hour. I think it's a very good TARDIS team, and it's great to see them throughout this serial. Then we move on to the second episode of the piece, which is of course The Flight of the Black Star, which is the Sixth Doctor and Constance Clark story, which is the other complement for this release. I really like that the companions aren't necessarily your first companions that you would think of for a multi-Doctor story. I like the fact that we're seeing Charlie Pollard return. Of course, it's a nice link back to the very beginning of the monthly range, which does of course follow a similar format within the Sirens of Time to this story, having singular episodes for the different Doctors. I like the fact that we've got Turlough, kind of a link to TV Doctor Who, and I absolutely adore the fact that throughout this story we have Constance Clark, a companion that has of course been introduced to Big Finish in recent years, of course in her first story, Crisscross. They've also travelled alongside Flip, as portrayed by Lisa Greenwood, and I love her character. Of course, she is a historical Wren from the World Wars, with a character that the Sixth Doctor has this excellent relationship with, and again, this story really presents how far the Sixth Doctor has came on Big Finish, and he is now a well-rounded incarnation of the Doctor, as opposed to that rather inconsistent incarnation that we got to see on screen, which is of course a compliment that I've mentioned many times in many previous Sixth Doctor Big Finish reviews. This second story focuses on the relationship between organics and artificial intelligence, and basically it's a sci-fi gang story, and you guessed it, the artificial intelligence wants to take over the universe and rid all life of organics, and it's a nice and funny twist at the very end, which is very enjoyable to listen to, and overall is another rather solid story. When Holdaway returns as Calypso Jones, who was previously seen within the Lovecraft Invasion. Of course, you don't need to listen to that story in order to understand her character, but she is a non-binary, basically traveller around the universe. She gets into a few sticky situations, and it is lovely to see her return in this story because her dynamic with Mrs. C, Constance Clark, and the Sixth Doctor is lovely, and it's great to see that relationship develop further, and to be honest, I would love to see her return in the future as well. The third mini-episode is Night Gallery, featuring the Eighth Doctor and Charlie Pollard, and was the episode of this release that kind of made me realise how much this episode overall was managing to do with the different locations and characters as we return to London in the 1990s, just before the millennia, and basically we have a Doctor Who vampire story as the Doctor meets up with the vampire known as Highgate, a vampire that the Doctor has had previous encounters with before, of course not within Big Finish or any other stories. We just get the impression that they've known each other already, and they've had a little bit of an agreement that he can continue living in London during this time period as long as he continues under the radar, live a normal life as a vampire in 1990s London. So this is a story that kind of focuses on a vampire uprising of a different kind. We have a commentary on art communities and basically this new form of art with an art gallery opening, and a certain new vampire wants to lure all of the art critics of this period to this art gallery in order for a little bit of payback, and it is a really fun story. I think that Highgate is such a great character. I think that his relationship with the Eighth Doctor in particular is really enjoyable, and we have a lovely scene to end out this story where we have the Eighth Doctor and Highgate sitting on the roof of a building as the sun comes up, and this lovely commentary on day-to-day life and kind of people going about their own lives, living in their own little worlds, and it was just a really lovely warm moment. I really liked Highgate as a character. I enjoyed hearing the more fun version of the Eighth Doctor. Having recently reviewed Stranded, of course the most recent Eighth Doctor box set, within that series he's very stern and more serious. He's sick of being stranded on Earth, and that's the same for the Time War series as well. We are getting so used to this more serious version of the Eighth Doctor, and I'd love to see them go back and do more stories with this more adventurous younger version of the Doctor before he had his mind wiped millions upon millions of times. Maybe even a box set with him and Charlie together would be a really welcome inclusion to the shelf. India Fisher was a really lovely companion for this release as well, a lovely dynamic with the Eighth Doctor, really bringing this story together, very enjoyable indeed. So then we end off with the Lost Moon, or the Lost Moon of Batoya, where this episode is set, and we have some great interactions between the different Doctors, but also the different companions. One of the favourite things I think to come from this story is the fact that Constance Clark has a little bit of a crush on the Eighth Doctor, and the Sixth Doctor is a little bit miffed by that. I think it's beautiful the way that it pans out, and I love the way that these Doctors come together and basically tackle the situation, and they interact with the problem that Gostak has wanted wanted to solve many years ago. As already mentioned, it's a very personal thing for the Doctor, given how much he appreciated Gostak as a tutor, but also we come across Vakras, who is basically the main character who underpins this story, because he is the last of the Death Lords and he has claimed war on the universe. I'm not going to say anything else about Vakras, but I think that the final part is unexpected, a delight, and it definitely adds another level to this story. It's to have something that's a bit different and a bit more refreshing, accompanied with several Doctors in the room at once, throwing little snarky digs at each other. What is not to like? There is a beauty and a novelty about multi-Doctor stories, and it's very clear that Robert Valentine really enjoyed writing this one. That is the Doctor Who monthly range, The End of the Beginning, as written by Robert Valentine. Overall, a really enjoyable story, but also it's not reliant on anything that we've seen within the Big Finish monthly range before, so please don't fall into the category of, I can't listen to this release because I've not listened to the other 274 releases that have came out in the past. You don't really need any prior knowledge because this episode does all of that world building for you. It is a great introductory release, it's a great celebration of these Doctors that have been truly developed into more well-rounded Doctors compared to what we got to see on our TV screens, but also is a great celebration of how vast the Doctor Who universe is, bringing characters from TV Doctor Who, from audio drama Doctor Who, together to create a rather representative, fun, dynamic, location-filled story that has, of course, that sprinkling of sci-fi, universe domination, and some brilliant Doctor interaction in there as well. So yes, overall, a really enjoyable release, and a final chapter coming to a close for Doctor Who's probably longest-running series. Goodbye, monthly range. It's been a joy. Once again, I say it as if I'm not going to be taking a look at the monthly range ever again. I am going to be doing that. I'm going to be reviewing more in the future. Hopefully I will go back to take a look at some of the older releases. In particular, I would love to go back and take a look at the older 6th Doctor stories and some of the highlights of this range, because let's face it, the Big Finish catalogue is immense and there is lots to explore. But now the main question is, what is next for the classic series Doctors? And as this episode rather nicely presents at the very end, adventures. Lots of adventures. So thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week, from Big Finish, product reviews, book reviews, and much more. And on that note, have a nice day. I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.